Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure on behalf of the Shawnee Mission School District and the Board of Education to welcome you to a very special Meet the Author Town Hall. Today we are at Comanche Elementary School, where our audience is made up of 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students from Comanche, and we're glad to have them in the audience. We are welcoming today a very special author and educator, Steve Loe, who has agreed to join us. He makes his home right here in Shawnee Mission. And so the students today are going to have an opportunity to ask him questions, to hear from him about his experiences as a writer and the publishing process, and have a little bit of a book discussion today. I want to take a moment to thank Royal Fireworks Press. They are the publisher of the most recent book for Steve Loe, which is called The Glimpsing Book, and they provided, as part of Shawnee Mission's digital learning initiative, they thought it would be great if they could provide digital copies for our student readers today, and so we appreciate their partnership. They also provided some print copies for the teachers and to have here at the school. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Loe. He is currently the principal at Shawnee Mission West High School, but today he's returning here to Comanche, where he was principal at Comanche for 3 years prior to going to West. And before going into administration, he actually served as an English teacher both at the middle and high school level. Please help me welcome Steve Loe.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much. It's great to be back. And I want to apologize in advance to the students for giving you more homework. But I think it was a great opportunity to sit down and get to talk about the book. So thank you so much, students, for doing the extra work. Thank you, Mrs. Krause, Mrs. Ogle, Mrs. Fleming, for all the extra effort you guys put in. And thank you to Mrs. Tilley, Mr. Barnett, for allowing this to happen. So, I'm going to start, if you don't mind, telling you a little bit about what inspired the book. And then next, we can sit down and just talk about it. And I know we kind of prepped some study questions for us, and we'll go over those. How's that sound? Does that sound good? All right. So, like a former English teacher, I made a PowerPoint. Okay? As you know, it's called The Glimpsing Book. But when you think about writing, and we all do it, right? We're all creative writers sometime in our education. Different things inspire us. Well, there's a handful of things that inspired me. I always wanted to write a mystery. I love reading mysteries. You know, it's about clues and solving problems and kind of suspenseful and thrilling. I grew up on Scooby-Doo, right? That was good stuff. You a Scooby-Doo fan? Oh yeah, that's good. I love the Encyclopedia Brown series. And I know those are still going on, and this might date me a little bit, but I like the Hardy Boys. That's kind of old school. But I loved a good mystery. And then I got to thinking about characters. Well, what can we do there? Well, I wanted someone who was a reader, because I think books inspire us, right? But then I got to thinking, is it the book that inspires us, or is it the story in the book? Because not all books tell stories, right? So I wanted to develop a character that was a reader. Next, one other piece was libraries. We're sitting in one right now, right? Love libraries. That's a big one. Was that library in the book? That was the Library of Congress. That is the biggest library in the United States. So can you imagine how many stories are in that library? Tons of stories, right? One last little piece that kind of inspired me about this story, The Glimpsing Book, was this quote from one of my favorite books by Andy Andrews called The Traveler's Gift. And he says, "I will believe in the future that I do not see. That is faith. And the reward of this faith is to see the future I believed." And I thought, that's a pretty powerful statement and something we can all kind of live by. And I thought, what if a young person actually had a physical book, like a crystal ball, that could give them a little bit of a peek at what could be, only if they did. So those are the things that kind of prepared me or inspired me to start writing The Glimpsing Book. Any questions at this point? Yes, sir.
How did you come up with the title Una Superior? however you say it in Latin.
Yeah, and I have trouble with that too. Unus opero. And by the way, I had a Latin teacher in our district help me decide that title because I wanted some history behind it, some ancient history. And as we know, some of the early writings were all in Latin. And they belonged a lot to the church and not to the common people. So I wanted one must do, but I wanted it in Latin because it's such an ancient time, if you remember from the story, how it originated. So, yes ma'am.
Did anyone in our school or West inspire you for the characters in the book?
You know, that's a great question. And yes, but not one particular student. I took like bits and pieces from different students and created a new student. All right, how about we take a quick break and then we'll, from that discussion, and jump into some of our study questions. Does that sound good? All right. So remember, kind of focused on a handful. We ready? All right. Which character do you most relate to and why? That's a good segue, by the way. Yes, ma'am.
TP because I'm a good artist too.
What's your favorite thing to do? Paint, draw, sketch, or all of them?
Just like draw.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I like both Henrietta and TV because I like drawing at home and I like reading at the same time.
Oh, good.
So I grew up drawing and reading, so
one day you'll grow up and write a children's book with illustrations. That's cool. Yes, ma'am.
I feel like I relate to Lyndon McCurry.
Oh, and why is that?
Because when Henrietta was having trouble deciding how to do the library presentation, Lyndon McCurry helped Henrietta, and like I help people who feel down on themselves, and I like to write and I like to read, and Lyndon McCurry is the author of Henrietta's favorite books, and she read to write the books.
Excellent. Very good. Yes, ma'am.
I think I'm most related to Henrietta because if I could, I'd stay in the library and read all day long.
She did. She hid in the back of the library, didn't she? Mm-hmm. But what did she have to end up doing? You remember the little slogan?
She had to end up going out and doing more action because one, Mrs. Renna told her that she couldn't do it anymore because she had caught them. And
right.
two, because she had some other stuff to do, like working on their presentation and stuff.
So what was their big mission? Do you remember?
To save the library,
go.
fiction of the library, that is.
Excellent. How about that back row? There we go.
I feel like I relate most to Henrietta because when something bad happened in her life, she hid away and tried to ignore what was going on by reading, but in the end ended up with a little help from the people that she met doing things instead of just hiding. And when I first moved, I was upset and didn't do much other than read. And now, after I've met a few good friends, I'm more outgoing and do things.
That's a great response. Thank you for sharing that because we've all been in those times where we just feel like hiding in the back of the library or in our room and we don't want to talk to people. And it's tough. We've all been there. But sometimes you make good friends, they give you the support, and you just have to do, right? And sometimes it's not easy. Good. Let's take one more on this question.
I think I most relate to Sebastian because we both seek knowledge.
Oh.
Because, like, sometimes when I'm at break from school, like spring break, I get bored even though I'm not at school and I could be doing anything I want.
But what do you end up doing?
I end up, like, looking for math games on the internet or something because I'm...
You the man. This is what a teacher wants to hear. But you know what? I'm going to relate to you for a minute because I'm old, right? I'm kind of middle, right? I still remember to this day when I was 5 years old and I was about a few months away from kindergarten, I told my mom, I just want homework. I'm bored. And she looked at me like I was crazy, right? But I'm like you. I like to be challenged. I like to learn. And isn't that what it's about? Awesome. How about the next question? Let's go on to, what do you think the characters might be doing in 5 years? Yes, ma'am.
Sebastian would probably be doing more adventure and finding out the rest of Henrietta's photos because he's in. TP would probably be doing more murals in different places and get his art career to take off. Henrietta would probably be helping Curry and saving more fiction at other public libraries, and Miss Rena will help more kids around the world.
Excellent. And did you do that all on your iPad?
Yes, I did.
Wow. Very nice. What was the first one again?
It was Sebastian. He'd be doing more adventure to find the rest of Henrietta's photos and looking for more, I don't know how to explain it, but more mysteries in the world.
Okay, so real quick, how many photos do you think he needs to find?
I think it'll probably be like 4 or 5. I don't remember how. I think it's 4.
4 total, right?
Yeah.
How many were in the book? Do you remember? This is all depends on you right here. How many did she find?
He found 8 photos.
He's going to eventually find them, but how many did he find in this novel? Do you remember?
He found 2 of Henrietta,
They're
4 of
right there,
Cupel.
perfect. Only 2. So there's 2 more to find, right? There you go. Did you want to add to that, or do we want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I respectfully disagree, and I think that he's not going to look for them because he said that he's going to wait for them to come to him.
Wow.
And he's not going to go look for them because they'll find him on their own or his own.
Very interesting point. Thank you. Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
I'm going to say Sebastian, I agree with all 3 of them. Because Sebastian would be, yes, he would also be looking for different mysteries, but at the same time, if things would get hard for him, he'd start imagining more things. And Henrietta, I think that she'll probably be kind of like Miss Rena, right? And I think Miss McCurry and Miss Rena, both of them, she'd probably be helping people in a library or something, helping them look for books, at the same time writing her own books and making her own stories, kind of like Una
Aparo. Close enough, right?
No. And helping people with their troubles and telling them stories of when she was little or when she had troubles and she got through them with TP and Sebastian and all of that. And I think TP, he'd kind of be like the Pablo Picasso of 2016.
Okay, very good. Other thoughts about what are these guys going to be doing in 5 years?
I think Henrietta will probably become a great friend of Miss McCurry. And Sebastian will probably find the second photo of Henrietta. And TP will probably be the most famous painter of the century.
Ooh, all right, very good. One more on this one? Someone, go ahead.
I think for Henrietta, she would become a writer like Lyndon McCurry. And for TP, I think he would go on to be a good artist. And for Sebastian, I think how Savannah said it, Sebastian would go on to do a lot, so the photos can come to him, and he's going to do a lot more mysteries and all that.
Good. Okay, next one. What is the real magic in the glimpsing book? Now we're going to go back. This is the hard part. Give an example from the story to support your thought. So what is the real magic? And give an example.
The real magic is that it helps that some people try and write books that try and help people, but they don't exactly work how they're supposed to. Eunice
Una Sapero.
Opero.
We're learning our Latin today.
Is actually helping all three of them, Henrietta, TP, and Sebastian. TP's learning how to show his talent, even though if his relatives don't like it. Henrietta is learning to act because she's been hiding in the library all of her life, basically.
Excellent. Very good.
And Sebastian's learned not to try and dissect the beauty of things.
Excellent. Very good. Yes, ma'am.
I think the meaning of una sapor is like for a person who is chosen. Like it's not for everyone. That's why Miss Rena chose Henrietta, and like so only Henrietta probably would get it. So like it helps her like come out of her shell.
That's very good. What was the first thing that she, and I need some help remembering this. What was the first thing she did to come out of her shell? Do you remember way back when? Yes, in the back.
The first thing Henrietta did when she kind of came out of her shell was she went to help at the library and read to Daniela.
That's good. Very good. Excellent. Go ahead, pick up the mic. Just do it, right?
I think the real magic in Una Sapero is that because it reflected Henrietta's life, every time she did something big in her life, the book became longer. And at first she thought the book was like dumb and stupid, and she didn't really like it because she thought it was boring. And then when Miss Rena told her to keep reading, she thought that it was kind of weird that it became longer. And then when she gave it to Sebastian, it turned back when Henrietta first got it, because Henrietta went back into her shell and didn't do anything. Like she went back to the library and started reading.
Right. And then the book got shorter, didn't it? And she couldn't believe it. So we know this is fiction, right? It's not real. It's fun to write, it's fun to read, but there's not really a book out there that can do that. That physically grows and then shrinks and grows and shrinks, right? But the real magic is in the doing, isn't it? Have you ever had that happen in your life where you finally got up the courage to do something and you did it and new opportunities happened because you did that one thing? Has that ever happened to anyone? Raise your hand. Good. Excellent. What other questions? I want to take time because I know we did some study questions, but what other questions do you have about the story? Because we're going to talk about writing and the process and everything after the break. But what other questions do you have about characters and setting and things like that?
Okay, so I've been working this whole time. Will there be another book?
20 years.
No, seriously, I want another book.
You know, I really do. I want to. But it's going to take a while. And there's about 9 chapters in the next book. So.
You already started it?
Yes.
Wow, yay.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there anything based on Comanche in the Glimpsing book?
Again, I kind of back to the earlier question. These characters were built by personality traits that I saw in some of the Comanche students, but I just kind of picked 1 or 2 from each and then built a new student.
How do you feel about the book?
Happy, you know, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this is kind of my hobby, right? And in the mornings or on the weekends or in the summers, it relaxes me. But to finally see it actually published, that's a pretty good feeling. So, someone new, yes.
How long did it take you to write the book?
You know, we're kind of leaking into the next part of this, but I'll give you a sneak peek. How's that? Actual writing or publication? Because that's 2 different things.
Writing it.
About 2 years. Yes, someone new back here.
I was gonna ask, like, why did you make Miss Rena? Like, you know how she's like, supposedly she died and then she came back. Like, why did you write her like that?
Well, it's part of that magic. It's a part of mystery. And we really never label her anything, do we, in that book? Some people call her a witch, some people call her an angel, but we never call her anything. So I let the readers decide what you think she is and why that was. So it's kind of up to you. Anybody new? Yes.
How did you make Unisapur feel so magical? And how did you make it feel real at the same time?
Well, and you have to go into, when you write something like this, it's a mystery and it's fiction, but you also do want to have real characters and real action so people can relate to it, right? But then you just kind of sprinkle in some of that fun stuff, the what ifs. So you just kind of have to blend it. Yes, ma'am.
It never told us in the book how old any of the characters were. That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Seventh graders? Because they were in middle school. But I don't,
Well,
you're
I
right, I don't
meant,
think I gave
like-
ages to other people. You're right.
The
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my question was like, you know how you had that poster in the library, which at one point it said creativity is, I think it said better than knowledge or something like that.
More important than knowledge.
Did you see it, or is your opinion is that your opinion?
No, but whose poster was that?
Miss-
Because I actually saw a poster of that.
Oh, that makes sense.
There is and it's a classic poster. I've seen it in a million classrooms. It's Albert Einstein, and sometimes he's sticking his tongue out. We know Albert Einstein, genius scientist, right? And it says up above, creativity is more important than knowledge. Now, does that mean knowledge is just not important? No. In fact, some people say the more knowledge you have, the more creative you can be. So they kind of go hand in hand. Yes. Go ahead.
I wanted to know if there were any parts of the characters that reflected you, and did you put yourself into any of the characters?
No, because I like looking at other people, and I like observing other people. I might agree with how some of them act, but no, none of them were really me. I kind of have a boring life. So. One more before break, or okay? Ooh, new.
How did you juggle the work of being a hardworking principal and an author?
Have a really great family. Brownie points. No, seriously, a lot of family support. And prioritizing. Family and school first. Those are my two. So those always come first. This is just a nice hobby on the side, and that's why it took so long. So maybe a little bit in the morning if it's okay, 30, 40 minutes, but mostly like the weekends and summer breaks. So that's why it took 20 years, if you think about it.
All right. I was so impressed with your questions and your comments. And guess what? Royal Fireworks Press they are so excited about this project and this partnership that they are going to, I don't know if your teachers have told you yet, but they have asked if you all would consider writing your own personal review of the book and submitting it to them. What do you think about that? Any takers on that? Okay.
More homework.
Very
No,
good. Some of you have already finished that. That's great. Hands up if you are going to be one of the people who is encouraging Mr. Loe to write a sequel to this. Okay, so I think we have some takers. All right, hands down. Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to kind of move away from talking specifically about the story. We're going to have Mr. Loe share with us a little bit about the whole process of writing and the journey of getting published. So we'll be back in a moment.
Wow.
Welcome back. We're here at Comanche Elementary School having a wonderful spirited discussion with author and educator Steve Loe. And we spent the first part of the program talking a little bit about the recently published book called The Glimpsing Book. But now we're going to welcome Mr. Loe back, and he's going to talk a little bit now about the writing process and his own personal journey to getting that book published. Help me welcome him back.
Well, thank you again for having me here. It's good to see some familiar faces, and great job in the first half in the discussion. Excellent responses. Okay, so the big question, writing. You guys do it all the time. I know you do because you're teachers. That's part of the curriculum. In regard to writing a book, and there's lots of books to be written, right? Nonfiction, right? Biographies. Well, I'm just going to talk about writing a young adult novel, okay? And that's for a specific age group. And whether you think so or not, there are kind of rules to follow. A certain page length. The characters have to be a certain age. Obviously, the plot has to be something that's high interest for this age group, right? So what I put together, though, to kind of give you a timeline of how long it took, I just went month by month, year by year. So what I do when I do write, and like I talked about earlier in the first part, is that this is a hobby of mine. Okay, it's kind of like therapy, relaxing. So I don't do it every single day. So a lot of professional writers who make a living at this write every single day, 4, 5, 8 hours a day. So this timeline reflects me writing maybe 40 minutes this morning, 40 minutes that morning, maybe an hour on the weekend, and then when summer comes and I have a little bit more time, maybe more consistent. So I guess what I'm saying is some authors could have written this book in 6 months because they're really super focused on that task. But they do say that 80% of all writers who publish do not do it for a living. They have another job. So they probably kind of follow more this path. All right, so way back on October 29th of 2010, because whenever I get an idea stuck in my brain about writing a book, I jot that date down because it helps me, all right? So that's when I started brainstorming and thinking about this, and that takes a while. And I like to start off with my hand and writing notes on a piece of paper, and they're just all jumbled up, and sometimes I'll be riding down the street in the car, and I'm like, so I just keep saying over in my head because I don't want to like write and drive. So I'll wait and get to where I'm going, and then on a little note, I'll jot down that note and put it in my pocket. And then I go home and I put it into the computer. I type it up. So one drawer at home has all these Post-it notes and small little pieces of paper that I've used. Okay, so that's kind of the October 29, 2010 time. Then, once I feel really good about the characters and the setting, I just jump right in. And you know how hard it is sometimes to stare at a blank piece of paper and try to start? That's not easy sometimes. You just got to do it. And you just have to write, knowing that you're going to have to rewrite. One of my favorite authors, someone asked him, how do you write so well? They said, are you a natural born writer? He goes, no, I'm not a natural born anything, but I'm a really good revisionist. In other words, that's what writing is. So look at November 2010 all the way through November 2011. So a whole year, all I did was write, rewrite, write, rewrite, throw away, edit, add. That's the way it is. That's the way it goes. Then finally, in January, I had 3 really good friends, actually 4, because the first person who ever reads my writing is my wife. She has priority. Poor soul. Sometimes it's not very good, and she's just a very nice person. And she might go, yeah, okay, that's okay. Or, yeah, I liked it. But she's the first reader. Then the second, and I was lucky, I had 3 buddies who've already written novels. In fact, if you remember Lois Ruby, she was here a couple years ago, and she did an after-school book talk on one of her novels. I gave her a copy and said, hey, will you look at this? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So right after November 11th, I gave it to these people to read. They gave me feedback. I took that feedback and I spent the next 2 months polishing the final draft. 2 months trying to get it right. Then the hard part comes. Send in queries. Seeing if people want to publish it. Seeing if an agent wants to represent it. Because, you know, like sports figures have an agent to help them negotiate a deal, right? Authors do too. So, after 41 rejections, which is, by the way, low, sometimes it's higher. Actually, I could really put this in perspective. After 20 years of rejection, because there have been other projects that didn't go well, I finally had a yes from Royal Fireworks. But that took how long? That's almost a year of just sending out flyers. A query is a letter to a publisher that says, hey, this is what my book's about. This is the audience it's for. You want to consider it? And they're usually polite, no thank you. But you can't let that stop you, because that's normal. So then when Royal Fireworks said yes, I was excited. But you know what? I was still a little nervous, because I know even once you get a contract, it takes a long time. And things can break down. So I only told my wife, and she and I said, shh, we're not going to say anything until we get a physical book in our hands. So June 2013 is when we signed the contract with Royal Fireworks. Then they immediately, pretty much 3 months later, or 2 months later, they sent me proofs, and they look like this. They come in this format. And they say, hey, look through this. We edited it a couple times here and there. See what else that you think needs to be changed and give it back to us. So I did that in July 2013. But it wasn't until almost a year later, or after a year, that they had some cover design. They were trying to figure out a good cover. Do you guys like this cover? Yeah. This was Royal Fireworks' idea, the publisher. And it took them a while to get a good cover. So by 2014 of the fall of that year, they said, I think we got one. Now, they've been really awesome with us. Always communicating, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Always giving us a voice in creating this. That's pretty good. So then finally in December 2014, we got an advanced copy. An advanced copy doesn't look like this. And I was going to bring it, but I gave it to my 8-year-old, and she gave it to her teacher. So it's at her school. Sorry. But it looks it's not as glossy, and it doesn't have all this stuff on the back yet. It's called an advanced copy because they just want you to look at it and look it over. Okay? So then finally, March 31st is when they published it. So how many years is that for this particular project?
About 5.
Yep, just about 5, about 4.5. It's a long time. And when they sent the proofs to me to look over, it had been how many years since I really saw the book or worked with it? A long time, right? So you have to go back and reread and reread and reread. So if you ever decide to sit down and write a book, make sure you write something that you really like, because you will be reading it 1.2 million times. That's that way. Okay, I kind of wanted just to give you a glimpse at the first initial rough draft, chapter 1, page 1, and the one we sent to the publisher. And it's really hard to read, so I'm going to squeeze over here, and I'm just going to read the first paragraph. This is way a long time ago. Chapter 1, Stern, November 2009. And Calcutta, formerly known as Calcutta, India. By the way, that was all in red because it was an early draft. Martin Stern wiped the sweat from his brow, sighed, and studied the most recent picture for the millionth time. He wondered how he ended up in this crowded, dirty, hot place. Just a year ago, he was an up-and-coming young reporter on staff at the New York Times, big position, big money. Now the big position was gone, and soon the last of his money would be too. This is what you guys read, or something pretty close. Book 1, How Beautifully Things Crash Together. Prologue, Sebastian, Washington, D.C. Impossible. I, Sebastian Way, simply cannot accept impossible. And I won't go on and read it because you've read it. Who's this Stern guy? Well, my first thought was that I wanted to Henrietta. I knew Henrietta up here. But I wanted a journalist who was on a mission for some New York Times project and stumbled across those pictures. And it overtook him so much that it became almost like an obsession. And he lost his job. Well, that didn't work. So guess what? Delete. I threw a whole chapter out. Start over. That's not young adult material. That's not going to be something that's captivating. That's not going to give them someone their age to connect to. That's writing, right? I wanted to go back because remember I talked, one of my friends was Lois Ruby. She's written Still Away Home, Rebel Yell, excuse me. She graded my homework. That's how I see it. Authors, they get their assignments graded. This is Lois Ruby's, well, I sent this to her. In here are all of her comments. I couldn't pay her enough for all of her generosity and time. This is huge importance. So I want you to turn around, look at your teacher, and thank them greatly for grading your homework. But you know what? They brought up math, right? Every time you get feedback and you stumble and fail and fall and they pick you back up and tell you how not to do that again, you'll learn. That's exactly what happened here. Right here. So I'm just going to pass this around and you can kind of just thumb through it and look at all of the comments she wrote. Now, it wasn't every page, but she went through every page. And she gave some good stuff sometimes, but mostly because what you want is you want the critiques. And look at everything, and it's hard to see, but these little squiggly lines, she wants that cut, reword, that cut. She's telling me right here, hey, this is an intense moment. The motive of that character cannot be interrupted. The pace of that action cannot be interrupted with all this stuff. Take it out. Yes, ma'am. Because she knows. She wrote 9 novels before I wrote 1. So you heed the advice, you take the advice of people that have been there before you. It's a great learning moment. I'll never forget this. In college, I was taking a fiction writing class. And my professor said his first novel he wrote was 750 pages. He took it to the publisher, and they gave it back to him, 500 pages. They had cut 250 pages. And he went, ouch. But it was better, it was tighter, and that's just how you have to see it. This is my last slide I want to show you in regard to writing, and then we'll talk more about the writing process. I wanted to quote Walt Disney, because you know Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper because he didn't have an imagination and not very many good ideas. Someone told him that in his life. In fact, he had a lot of failures, but yet he kept succeeding, didn't he? I love this. It says, around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Does anybody remember what movie that came from? They put it on, that is a quote from Walt Disney, but they put that at the beginning or at the end of one of his more recent movies, or Disney's most recent. Might not be recent to you anymore, but did anybody see Meet the Robinsons? See that? That's about inventing. You have that one at home? One of my favorites. And remember the scene, there's a scene where they ask him to fix the peanut butter and jelly gun. Remember that? And he thinks he has it, and then it blows up. And it gets everybody peanut butter and jellied. Is that a verb? No, just kidding. So, and he's scared because he's like, oh no, I failed. And they all went, and they clapped and they said, that's a great failure. Congratulations. Because the message was, go back and retry again. Because that's what we do. You learn way more from failure than you do from getting it right all the time. So the reason I bring this clip into it, if you're thinking about writing, writing is all about that. Writing is do-over and learning and getting better. And really, everything we do is about that. Math, social studies, science, all of it. So what I did on the right is I put one of my query letters that I sent to this agent, and then her polite, very polite, rejection letter. So I'm going to pass that around. So here is and you know what? They get such a high volume, sometimes it's just a postcard. And they're not allowed to really, they don't have time to give you subjective or like Mrs. Ruby did, really detailed help. So you just get this. So you can pass that around and feel my pain as you do that. Just kidding. So at this time, let's open it up. Let's talk about the writing process and writing books or writing in the classroom and what's that like.
I was wondering if there was like a story or a teacher or someone in your life who got you started writing.
Wow, that's a good question. Who got me started? My parents, they love stories. They got me reading, and I was not a reader growing up. I was a very slow reader. I loved math and science. I loved stories, and I loved reading, but I couldn't always keep up. But I just kept trying, and I had good teachers. And I'm not saying that just because teachers are here. But I can still remember this. I am 45 years old, and I still remember when I was 8 years old in second grade, and Mrs. Gilbert would read to us every afternoon for the last 20 minutes of school. Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle, Encyclopedia Brown, and it's not called Willy Wonka, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? All of these wonderful stories, and she said it so expressively. I mean, you left there going, wow. So that's where it kind of all started.
Anyone else in your family besides your mother and father, or like your sister and brother, like your cousins and your grandparents inspire you?
They all kind of had that inspiration, but they all had their own little ways of doing so. The immediate inspiration was that my mom and dad and the teachers. Yes, ma'am.
Do we read the second note in there?
You can read whatever. You don't have to read any of it, or you can just look at it and pass it on. That's not homework.
I'm curious if the students, you talked a lot about revision, having to make revisions, and that you had some great peer mentors that offered to read, and family members who often offered to read. I'm curious with the students, do you all have a process like that in your classroom that when you do your writing, can talk a little bit about that and maybe ask a question of Mr. Lowe related to that process in your own classroom?
Before we start writing in Mrs. Ogle's class, we reread the story up to I reread it up to 3 times. That way I know what I have to write about. Did you do that?
Absolutely. In fact, when you reread a story or a poem a second time, do you find something new about it?
Yes.
Yes. Every time you reread a story, it kind of grows, doesn't it? It kind of grows. Let's look at a movie, because movies have great stories in them. How many have watched a movie more than once? Have you watched a movie more than once and the second or third time around you went, I didn't realize that was there the first time? Raise your hand if that's happened. Yeah, because they pack it so full that you're not going to catch it all the time. So good point. Teacher goes back and rereads. How many times did I say I reread this one? 1.2 million. It'll go up every time I mention it. But it did over and over again. Good one. How many times do we write a week, do you think? 2, 3 times a week? I mean, I know you're writing all like short answer or with math because you're always physically writing. How many times?
We write, if we're just like physically writing the answers, we write like every day.
Excellent. Every day. I was an English 10 teacher for a long time. And one thing that I tried to talk to my students about, because as a student myself, I was not a strong writer or reader. It took me a long time. And I waited to the last minute and wrote 2 hours beforehand and tried to do that paper. You can't do that. We wouldn't want you to go to your band concert and only practice once, right? You practice over and over again. If you're going to play basketball, we want you practicing as much as you can before the game, right? Same thing with writing. You got to do it every day. It's tough. And it doesn't have to be this much every day. It can be this much every day. Oh, yes, sir.
Did you ever get discouraged?
Oh, that's a great question. Did I ever get discouraged? No, every other day. Yeah, you, especially when you've written so long and you've sent it and you get so many rejection letters and you know it's part of the process, it still stings. It still stings. And you know what's more discouraging though? Is when you get stuck. When you're on chapter 21 and things are going really well and you just literally get stuck. What's next? I don't know. Because you're the only one in charge, right? So what will I do sometimes? I'll put it on the shelf. And I'll stay away from it for about a week and then come back and reread it with new eyes. Ding! Something clicks. It's kind of magical almost.
Have you ever felt bored when you read or write it?
No. I mean, I've had some assignments in my life that were not fun to write, like in college. But this is, like I said, it's my hobby. This is kind of my fun part of a weekend when I'm not hanging out with my family and I have a little quiet time. So the stuff I write is fun. That social studies paper I did in college, that was kind of hard.
How much money have you made off the book, or have you not made any?
That's a great question. And I'll say, that's a good question. It's not going to pay the bills, because we're doing it for fun, but it's a 10% commission. And what that means is, math people, if I sell this book for $7 or the publisher sells it for $7, how many does the author get? 70 cents. So, you know, I probably won't make a lot of money, and and it's set up where you get a royalty check once a year. So I really can't let it pay the bills. And I don't know how many copies they'll sell. So 70 cents times however many copies. Now, if we sell 2 million, and that's not going to happen. That'd be fun. But what they usually do in the industry, if you sell 5,000 copies, it's at 10%. If they sell 10,000 copies, it'll go 25%. So going back to that earlier quote, only about 20% of professional writers make a living, and this quote is probably old, make a living writing. Only 20%. Yes, ma'am.
So I had my own idea to write a story. Do you think I'm old enough to actually write a story? And how would I start it off? Like, I'm not going to start off like when you did practices for the Kansas State assessments for the essays. I had no idea how to start off for opening.
That's a great question. Number one, yes, you can write a story, and you can do it now. Kindergartners in their own genre can write a story, if you think about it. Does anybody know the book The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, young adult book? When you get into 7th, 8th grade, that's a good read. She wrote it when she was 16 and was published when she was 16. So yes, you can. How do you do it? I can share my way. There's a billion different ways. Take notes. Every time you get an idea, take notes about character, setting, plot. Those 3 biggies. Do a little timeline, and then just start writing, knowing that it's not going to be perfect. Because I think the biggest problem young writers have is that they think it has to be perfect the first time. Even the best of the best don't do it right the first time. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's a really weird one.
I like weird questions.
I was going to ask you what time and what places did you write when you were like on your writing process in the book? Where did you write it and what time and all that?
Well, at home. I do all this at home. It's down in our basement. We have just a small computer desk, nothing fancy, no Stephen King, big mammoth oak, study. It's just our family computer. I sneak on before the kids get there, and I try to do it early morning. I'm a morning person. You know what I'm saying? But we're split in our house. Mama's a night person. I'm a morning person. I think maybe 3 of the kids are night people. Only 1 is a morning person. So I got time in the morning every once in a while, and then the weekends. The weekends are big. Yes, ma'am.
Did your kids ever give you ideas about writing the Glimpsing book?
That's a good question, and the answer is no on that one. No, they had not. Since then, have they given me ideas? Yes, absolutely. And our current 6th grader, he likes to write. He likes to think up stories. Yes, ma'am.
The settings in your book, have you been there before?
No. Actually, let me take it back. The question was, the settings in the book, have I been there before? I have been to Washington, D.C. for 1 afternoon. That's it. And I've never been to the Library of Congress. And I've never been to India. Do we have to go to write? Can we maybe research and think about it? You bet. That's a great question.
I was wondering, how did you first off get inspired to actually involve the Library of Congress and places in Kolkata, India, and the people who are working there? And how did you get inspired to do those people?
I wanted to mix a little bit of history, and I wanted historical figures that have done a lot of doing, that have made a big impact. Obviously, President Obama, that's a historical moment. Gandhi, a historical figure. But I also wanted to create somebody on the side who was an important person on the side that changed history that we didn't know. Because with all these famous people in history, there's a team of people behind them making that happen. So that's kind of how I got historical people who've changed things.
I think we have time for one more question.
All right. Yes, sir.
What was the reaction of most people that you told you were writing a book?
The number one reaction? When did you have time to write a book? Literally. That's been the number one reaction. And hey, I'm still in this quote, and I think it was either from Oprah or Maya Angelou. And she said, everyone has the same 24 hours in the day. Make it happen. You decide. So that's the number one reaction.
Okay, before we close, I have a question for the students because we have just over 20 students here who have read the book. I'm curious if they would give you any revision or change. What change would you, if any, because I know that you love the book, most of you have said that, but is there any note of change that you would have offered to Mr. Loe, the author?
Mr. Jenkins being able to open that secret room in the library.
How would you want to change it?
Maybe it was just like a place where people anybody could go.
Oh, you want to open it up to a few more people?
Yeah.
That's good. That's interesting.
I was gonna say how Sebastian ended up in the end of the book. I would have left it more where, he would also be interested in Unis Apera.
That's good enough.
Apera. And how he would study on in the rest of his years, and how he would find out more about the book and about the people who have had the book, and more about what they did in their life and what they studied and what changed in their lives.
Excellent. Time for a couple more. Very good. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe if you changed the setting where Rose Hill Elementary was, because they kind of live in a dump.
Oh, Roosevelt Elementary.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Not a bad idea. Yes, ma'am.
After the book ended, I still had a lot of questions that needed to be answered, so rereading is a good idea. And if you have any questions that you hadn't answered in the book, then put them down. Put more answers to the questions down.
So maybe a sequel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Would you help me thank Mr. Loe for being here today?
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And thank you, Comanche students. You were a fabulous audience. So impressed with you and your questions and your comments. And I think we better put our hands together for some other special people, and that's your teachers and the librarian who was so gracious to lend us this beautiful space. So please say thank you to them. And we need to say thank you again to Royal Fireworks Press for sharing the digital copies with us and their invitation for you as young writers and reviewers to send in your reviews. So I will look forward to seeing those. And I think you may have, if you need a publicist, we have a student over here who's made a trailer for the book, very impressive. And so that's very exciting too. And don't forget, if you are looking for a good book, to be sure to visit your school library or your local library. Thank you for watching.